Welcome back, everyone. Today we'll talk about life in Bogota and some pros and cons while I was living there. Pardon the noise. I'm outside enjoying the weather here. There's some music in the background, animal sounds, some birds and things. So, Bogota. So, what do I like? What did I like about Bogota? So, I would say, for a little background, Bogota is a very large city. Uh, and it has a population of approximately 8.8 million people. So there are a lot of people living in Bogota. I found that the people in Bogota were very industrious. I noticed that people were very about doing their work day in and day out. People had their small businesses in the sides of the street. People had their own little hustles that they were doing if they didn't have a regular job that they would be going to every day. Remember one time we were in Starbucks and there was a little girl who came and was trying to sell us some umbrellas. So in general, people are very industrious and people are very active. I like the fact that the people in Bogota are very active. People walk, they bike a lot. They are usually walking outside in the park, enjoying outside. So that was a great thing. So transportation, I think transportation was a key thing in Bogota. Obviously, it's a huge city with a lot of people in it, and there's a ton of traffic when you are outside, if you need to go from place to place. So transportation is really important. So how did I get around? So I mostly used Uber. So they have a very good Uber service there where you call the driver and they come and they take you where you need to go in a very timely manner. Depending on the distance where you're going, the price is really reasonable, I would say. I can get pretty much within a 5-mile radius in the city for approximately $4 or $5. So I think in general it's not very expensive. Other things you can use a taxi service if you don't want to use an Uber. But Uber was very safe. That's what I used most of the time while I was there. The taxis are a little bit more expensive. They're about an approximate 2,000 to 3,000 pesos extra if you're gonna use a taxi service. They have a service called Transmilenio, and the Transmilenio is a bus system that they have that has its own designated route in the streets so that they don't really mingle with the other drivers in the city. And Transmilenio is excellent if you are there and you're from there. The only thing that with Transmilenio that I was warned about was that I needed to be on alert when I'm there to make sure I'm not showing out any like jewelry or my phone or things like that, because I can get mugged. I could get mugged, so people advise me to not show too much stuff on the Transmilenio. But I took a ride there with a friend a few times. We've been to supermarkets and things, and it was straightforward as far as getting to where you're going. I would say though that I would not have used the Transmilenio on my own, because even this lady who was from Bogota, who was showing me around, she had to ask for direction on how to get from one place to the next. So it's really intricate, but I think in general it's a really good service that they have there to get you where you need to go. And it's very cheap. It's not expensive. It's not very expensive, at least not from my standpoint. I know that if somebody is from Bogota and you're used to certain prices, they might find that, well, it is expensive. Okay, so but the transportation is very, I would say, very well organized. Housing. So in Bogota, the housing system is organized by neighborhoods. So they have a system called a strata. And the strata, the population can choose housing in certain neighborhoods based on their income level. Stratas go from level 1 to 8, and the higher the number, the more expensive the neighborhood is and the more people pay for utilities. So people were able to live in decent neighborhoods, I would say, at lower prices if you were not someone who made a ton of money. That option is there, and a lot of people live decent neighborhoods that way. So that's the way to kind of equalize, amortize the weight of all the expenses that you have on a daily basis. I found that the city of Bogota was extremely convenient. We had access to everything that we needed in close proximity to our home, wherever we needed to go. And many cities are I like that, but I really like the fact that this was available there as well. Where I lived, I had access to a pharmacy, to a clinic, to multiple supermarkets, to multiple places to shop. The mall wasn't that far. I could walk there for about 15 minutes if I wanted to, but I didn't want to walk. I would just catch the Uber. It would take me there, and within 5 minutes I'd be there. And the parks were also really close. Our children really enjoyed that. We had one right across the street from us, and several in the radius within where we live. So convenience was a very key things. One of my favorite things also was the fact that they had this service called Rapi. So Rapi is an app that is available for you, where you can order food or other items that you need. You can order anything you want on Rapi as long as it's available on the app, and they have a lot. They have everything you can think of: pizzas, burgers, Colombian food, Indian food, anything that you're interested in, you can find it there. They also have Asian food, and so we used the service, especially when we were not necessarily cooking at home or anything like that. Sometimes on the weekends when we wanted to do something different. So we used that service a lot. One thing that we found that was really helpful, it's not just food. You can order groceries from them. You can order other things. Like one night I didn't have some items for my child at home, and I called and somebody got it for me, and they brought it home within a decent timeline. And the service is not, the delivery fee is not very high unless you're ordering something from really far, but the delivery is reasonable. These are all reasonable prices. Saved our lives on many occasions, and it made things so convenient. I remember one of my friends in Bogota was telling me how a lot of people just don't cook at home anymore because they have Rappi. You just deliver the food and that's it. So that's another really good thing. The weather. So that's a pro for me because I really liked the weather. So Bogota itself is at an elevation of about 2,000 feet above sea level. So the weather is cool. It's cooler, right? It's cooler. So on average, it's in the 50s, maybe in the 40s sometimes, but not really. It can get up there in the 70s and can get hot, but very rarely. So in general, it's cooler weather. So a light jacket is usually what's required for you to walk around. So I usually don't need a lot. The only other thing though with the weather is that it can rain pretty often. So sometimes you want to go out and enjoy the sun, and then it rains. Sometimes it rains at random and the weather is not quite as predictable as you would like it to be. So sometimes you'll find that it's you didn't know it was going to rain, so you always want to carry your umbrella around when you move around that area. So but I really liked the weather there. I didn't like it when it was too hot. You see, I don't like the heavy heat, and I don't like the super cold either. So I'm from Boston, so I know what freezing is. So the weather in Bogota was just perfect. Some with cons. When we first moved into our apartment, we ordered some furniture from a place called the Home Center, which is a major store there, similar to Walmart and others, and they sell furniture. One of the issues that we came across was that the delivery time is not quite the delivery time. So they can say they're coming, on a Tuesday next week, and you may be waiting till, 3 to 5 days after that. So it's not as exact as you what you would be used to in the States, but it does come. It's just inconvenient. So some cons for some people, of course, would be the weather. As I mentioned earlier, it rains often, and some people don't like that kind of colder, cooler weather. They'd rather be in a place like Medellin where it's more spring-like all the time, or Cartagena, it's really really hot, like the tropics. One thing specifically for me, because I like to walk, I'm a walker. I noticed that the sidewalks were pretty uneven a lot of the times. So sometimes I would walk, I'm walking normally, and there's a dip, a sudden dip. Or I'm walking and then I hit my foot against the bump, like because the sidewalk will change from being flat to a little bit of an incline really fast, or there's a bump or things like that. So I notice things like that because I have my ankle twist sometimes when I walk. So I've noticed that there's some issues with the sidewalks in terms of evenness. That's something that I didn't quite like, although I learned to maneuver around it. But yeah, that's one of the things I noticed. So pollution and noise. As we know, since there are so many people in that smaller location, there are a lot of cars, a lot of traffic, and a lot of noise in the city. So pollution is definitely an issue. Although the government there did a really good job in trying to cut back on the amount of pollution that people are exposed to by doing something called pico y placa, a rule that they have that certain cars with certain license plates can travel at certain days and certain hours of the day, and others cannot. So they can kind of lessen the congestion and the traffic that's in the city. So that was a good thing to help with that. And also they have the ciclovías, where on Sundays and on holidays you can walk in certain streets that are blocked off from traffic, so people can walk freely or cycle freely. So that's a good thing that helps the issue with pollution. I found that I was advised to be very careful when I went into some areas. So when I went into central, the center part of Bogota, although it was pretty well populated, people usually are about their business, but people advised me to be careful about using my phone or using jewelry in certain areas because muggings do happen, and those areas can be dangerous. So there are areas in Bogota where you have to watch out, where you can't just be as free as other places. The other issue that I noticed when I was in Bogota was that, so there was an issue with the government increasing taxes on food and on certain items. So the population was really unhappy, and because they had just gone through the pandemic, and people lost jobs, and jobs were hard to find, and people were struggling. And then the government came up with this issue with the taxes, so people were really unhappy. So there was organized protest pretty much every week, and sometimes several days a week for months at a time. And so what that meant was, if you were going out, if you were going to work, or you could be held up because of the protest. So some people would be going to work in the morning, and then they encounter the group of protesters, and they can't get through, they can't go to work. So that was an issue there. And the protests at some point got pretty dangerous, to the point where some people did die. Some of the protesters died because they had clashes with the police. And there are certain neighborhoods where those protests were a little bit more common than others. Where I lived, I didn't encounter any protests because it was a pretty safe neighborhood and people didn't do that there. But there are other neighborhoods where protests could be something regular, like every week. And that kind of hampered some things. Like there were some holidays, some festivities that I had thought about attending, but I couldn't because there was a protest going on. And I understand from the standpoint of people who lived in Bogota and how it affected their lives. And even now, people still feel unsatisfied with some of the changes that have been made, and there had been no rectification to the issue of the cost of life for the citizens. So that's it as far as my current list of pros and cons as in Bogota. And if you have any questions, feel free to comment, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Ciao.